If you have sound on, I'm not getting any.
Commissioner Hedgewood, can you hear us?
I can, yes, thank you.
We're just troubleshooting some issues, so just give us a minute.
Sure, no worries.
Hello, everyone. This is Alanis. By the way, I don't know if you can hear me.
Message, thanks for letting me know.
Of course. I'm not sure if you guys have started, but if you did, it's muted. I can't hear you guys.
Commissioner Blackburn, we haven't started quite yet. We are just waiting for one additional member to join us. We're trying to work on that.
Okay, awesome. Just want to make sure I wasn't missing anything. Thank you.
Now good to go.
Very good. We'll call the meeting of the Commission on Equity for the City of Lacey to order. I trust that all had a wonderful Thanksgiving with loving family, friends, neighbors, whoever might have been your guests. But we find ourselves on the downside of 2022, the tail end of November. So with that, let me call the meeting to order and identify who we have online. For the record, we have Commissioners Kim Sauer, Elena's Blackburn, John Hedgewood, and Christine Stolberg, in addition to the three of us that are present in the room, along with our staff support, Shannon Kelly Phone. The approval of the agenda, previous meeting minutes, and consent items. Is there a motion?
I move that we accept the minutes and the agenda and other items, consent items.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we accept the agenda, previous meeting minutes, and the consent items. Those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. And for the public comment, we have no persons here in the chamber with us in person. On the Zoom call, please raise your hand as you try to provide, well, there's no public comment, no one on the phone, email, or any way.
Not
Okay,
at this time,
very
Chair
good.
Jackson.
Then we'll move on to our inspirational item, and we failed to get a volunteer or a designee for that at the end of our last meeting, but thanks to Annie, Commissioner Clay, she volunteered to step in for tonight. And we'll just jump ahead and say, I will take care of the inspirational item for a December meeting. So if we forget it towards the end, that will be the case. So with that, Annie, thank you so much.
Yeah. In honor of Native Heritage Month, I am bringing a couple quotes from Billy Frank Jr., who lived between 1931 and 2014. He says, I don't believe in magic. I believe in the sun and the stars, the water, the tides, the floods, the owls, the hawks flying, the rivers running, the wind talking. They are measurements. They tell us how healthy things are, how healthy we are, because we and they are the same. That's what I believe in. He also said another quote, we have to work with each other. Our earth is crying and it's crying for help. In the everyday movement of our country, We can make a difference. We can make a difference.
Thank you, Annie. With Heritage Month coming to an end, that's an appropriate quote. Thank you so much. I worked with Billy Frank for a number of years on a number of committees, task forces, commissions, and he was quite a guy. He was quite a guy. He really was. So with that, it takes us right into our first business item, which is really very relevant, which is the draft land acknowledgement and land acknowledgement policy review.
Thank you, Chair Jackson. So tonight we are here to take a look at a draft land acknowledgement and a draft land acknowledgement policy. This was something that was added to the work plan, it should say in 2022. That is a typo up there, but something that was previously discussed in 2021. I believe it was November of 2021. So here a year later, it's coming back before this body. Land acknowledgements are a formal statement that recognizes, pays tribute to, expresses gratitude and respect for, and affirms the ongoing relationship between Indigenous people and the land, and also helps raise awareness of Indigenous histories, perspectives, and experiences, past, present, and future. And so what we have tonight is a draft policy as well as a draft land use acknowledgement. And we received the land use acknowledgement from a member of the Nisqually tribe. And then we crafted the policy around the draft that we received from the Nisqually tribe. And we have reached back out to the Nisqually tribe for some additional comments, not only on the land acknowledgement, but also on the policy itself. There are a few additions to the draft land acknowledgement that I want to go over here in just a second with you all, so you can see what everything was that was added, and then just to take some time to go over the body of the policy itself. So the idea is just to have a conversation today and go over what's in there, and then to ultimately come back to the Commission on Equity for a recommendation for moving it forward to the City Council at a later date once it's in a more finalized state. So just wanted to highlight a couple of things before we jump into the policy itself, but the history of land acknowledgements. So land acknowledgements are rooted in many Indigenous peoples' practices and cultural protocols. It's a way that they recognize other Indigenous peoples whose land one might be a guest on. And so I pulled this quote from the Duwamish tribe. The Duwamish tribe is located, in Seattle area. And they mentioned on their webpage talking about land acknowledgements that this is the quote: "It is important to note that this kind of acknowledgement is not a new practice developed by colonial institutions. Land acknowledgements is a traditional custom dating back centuries for many Native communities and nations. For non-Indigenous communities, land acknowledgement is a powerful way of showing respect and honoring the Indigenous people of the land on which we work and live. Acknowledgement is a simple way of resisting the erasure of Indigenous histories and working towards honoring and inviting the truth." So purposes behind having a land acknowledgement are to recognize and respect Indigenous peoples. It's to support Indigenous communities, to continue to build strong and authentic relationships with Indigenous communities in the area, as well as across the nation and abroad, to raise awareness of histories that have led to past and current development of areas, including the history of dispossession, displacement, colonialization, cultural erasure, and broken treaties. It's also recognizing Indigenous history, cultural, and positive impacts on the greater community and Native sovereignty. And I think importantly, something to stress is it's a first step of many to really inspire all of the above and to continue to do actions and build better relationships. And something certainly it is a performative act. And certainly that's something we want to be aware of when we're looking at what a land acknowledgement should be used for here at the city as well as externally. So I also just wanted to provide a couple of examples, and I know this wasn't in your packet. These are a couple of additions, but I'll send this newer slide deck out to you all after the meeting this week. But a couple of land acknowledgements. I've got Metro Parks here showing their land acknowledgement. And what you'll notice as we're going through these examples of a land acknowledgement is they vary greatly. They're not kind of cookie cutter. They are to be intentional. And, you know, the hope and our aspiration is to work with the Nisqually tribes and other tribes of Medicine Creek Treaty to make sure that our land acknowledgement is in a good shape. So for Tacoma Metro Parks, their land acknowledgement reads, Metro Parks Tacoma acknowledges that we operate on the traditional homelands of the Puyallup and Nisqually tribes and on the lands with deep significance to other Coast Salish tribes. Coast Salish tribes have lived on and steward these lands since time immemorial and continue to do so today. We acknowledge that this land acknowledgement is one small step toward true allyship, and we commit to uplifting the voices, experience, and histories of the Indigenous people of this land and beyond. Another example, this is taken from the city of Tacoma, and this is a advisory body, very much like this body. It is their bicycle and pedestrian technical advisory group, and you can see an example of using a land acknowledgement prior to a public meeting here. With the call to order and land acknowledgement, which it says, we greatly honor and acknowledge that we reside on the traditional lands of the Puyallup people. The Puyallup people have lived on this land since the beginning of time. They are here still today. They live, work, and raise their children, take care of their community, practice their traditional ways, and speak the traditional language just as their ancestors did. Another example from the University of Washington, Tacoma, just their land acknowledgement reads, we recognize that all of us at the UW Tacoma learn, live, and work on or near the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish people. In particular, our campus is situated on the traditional territory of the Puyallup. And since we've gathered virtually, so this was used for a lot of virtual classes, we also want to acknowledge the lands of the Muckleshoot, Nisqually, Squamish, Duwamish, and all other traditional lands we may be on. As people on these occupied territories, we have a responsibility to acknowledge the land, the ancestors who have cared for this land since time immemorial, and all other Indigenous connections today. We also have the responsibility to acknowledge the histories of dispossession and forced removal that have allowed for the growth and survival of this nation and institution. In light of this history, let us take active efforts in partnering with our Indigenous community members and neighbors to seek justice as we continue to work together as a community of learners, leaders, and educators. So those were a few examples. So what I'd like to do now is pull up the draft policy and just kind of walk through and then open it up for dialogue and conversation on the draft that's presented here tonight. So the intent of this policy is that it would be integrated into the City of Lacey's City Council policies and procedures. So very much like the art policy that we're going to take a look at here in just a second, as well as other types of policies on like how to run a public meeting, for example, when we're talking about the City Council. So the idea would be that this would be added to that larger document. So very much like the other policies found in that document, we use the same format. And so it starts off with the purpose, and then it provides what a land acknowledgement is, so giving that history. And then it provides the actual land acknowledgement itself. And so you can see the land acknowledgement and everything in the land acknowledgement that is in black fonts, not underlined, was language that was provided to the city by the Nisqually representative. And the items in red were things that we have added to it. And really the additions were really highlighting the Nisqually tribe and the Squaxin tribe, even though the reference is to the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek, which includes the Nisqually tribe. In addition to a lot of other tribes, a lot of Coast Salish tribes. And then finally, the last addition we have down here in the red, and I'll read the entire land acknowledgement, but I just wanted to go over the additions, was one of the feedback comments that we received from the Nisqually representative was really making sure to draw the history to the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854 so that people read it and know what's in there. And so we just wanted to make an emphasis on that and then include links, you know, in the future. The idea would be that this would be linked to an actual version, whether it's linking to the Nisqually Indian tribe website, which you can find the full Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854 or some other site. So as drafted, the City of Lacey's land acknowledgement is we acknowledge the ancestral land we are on today as the traditional territory of the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek signed in 1854, including the Nisqually Indian Tribe and Squaxin Indian Tribe. We acknowledge and remember not to forget those tribal people that are named but not recognized today and absorbed or relocated into other tribes for survival. We recognize the ancestors and their descendants that are still here. We acknowledge Indigenous people who called the land home before the arrival of settlers and have been here since time immemorial. We recognize the relationship that exists between Indigenous people and their traditional territories, which include the religious significance, self-determination, identity, and economic factors. The relationship helps people heal from the past and learn how not to inflict new wounds today. We recognize and respect Indigenous people as traditional stewards of this land and acknowledge the tribal governments and their role today in taking care of these lands. We recommend that community members read the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854. So in addition to having the full draft land acknowledgement, something we also wanted to contemplate was an abbreviated land acknowledgement. And the purpose of this would be that we can put it onto, for example, public meetings or historical markers, for example, where time and space might be somewhat constricted. And so we just wanted a shorter version that could be used in those instances, knowing that we might have to come with some limited space and time. So the abbreviated land acknowledgement reads something to the effect of we or this object. So for example, this historical marker is on the ancestral land of the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek, including the Nisqually Indian Tribe and the Squaxin Tribe. We acknowledge and remember those tribal people not recognized today that were absorbed and relocated in other tribes for survival. We recognize and respect the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek as the traditional stewards of this land since time immemorial and their role today in taking care of these lands today and in perpetuity. And then again, the addition of we recommend the community members read the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854. So those were the draft land acknowledgements that we have today. But before we dive into the discussion, I just want to go over what the entire policy has in it. So it does have use. And so the use that we've outlined is to open city meetings, events, and programming. Also to incorporate it as parts of city plans, reports, and other adopted policy documents moving forward. And then on certain city signage, markers, maps, and other materials as appropriate. And so some guidelines that are provided in the policy is that the land acknowledgement or the abbreviated land acknowledgement would be printed on council agendas, in particular the regular and special council agendas, and read aloud at the start of council meetings where appropriate as determined by the mayor or the presiding officer. In addition, that the land acknowledgement can be used for a host of other different public meetings as well as internal meetings. So for example, staff meetings, advisory board meetings such as this one, community meetings, ceremonial events, or large events. So for example, we have coming up here the lighted parade. So that could be large events that the land acknowledgement could be read at. Also some recommendations for when not to use that, and that's specifically for meetings or events hosted by other organizations. So to really allow them the space, to do a land acknowledgement if they are going to do a land acknowledgement. There's also some recommendations for use by the city at city meetings and events. And again, reading the full or the abbreviated one should be at the beginning of the events. The introduction should be simple and direct. And to speak from your heart when reading the land acknowledgement, again, not making this a performative event, but really, speaking the message and bringing the respect that comes along with the land acknowledgement. And then not including other types of announcements when you're reading the land acknowledgement. So to really have it as a separate event within your larger event. And then some direction on how to incorporate it into city plans, reports, and other adopted policy documents. So having it, again, the full or the abbreviated text being at the very beginning of those types of documents. And including with those documents, always a link to get more information. So the idea would be that the city would have a website that would have the land acknowledgement and then also provide meaningful links outside of the organization where an individual might be able to learn more history about this area and the indigenous tribes that are here. I got some direction on signage and historical markers and maps. So again, having the full or the abbreviated land acknowledgement as part of it. And when there is space available, using the full land acknowledgement, but, recognizing that there are limitations at times which the abbreviated version might be necessary. And then, like I mentioned earlier, just having a web page that's dedicated to the land acknowledgements where people can get more information moving forward and to have that linked when possible to when the land acknowledgement is being used. So for example, I mentioned it, potentially being at the beginning of a public meeting. So making sure that on that land acknowledgement, there is a link embedded somewhere too, so that people could click on it and access more information. So that is the draft land acknowledgement and land acknowledgement policy. So I'll take a pause there and check in with the commission again to get some feedback, questions, thoughts, ideas, concerns from the group.
Yeah, I like it. I had a couple of questions, but they were answered there. It was like, when do we use it? I noticed city council meetings and all, they do a land acknowledgement. I'm going, how is that decided that you do a land acknowledgement? And I've been to other events in recent years and in Tacoma and other places, and they do a land acknowledgement. So this really helps me to understand that better.
I think the museum and their events, they already use it, but
Yeah, and Commissioner Clay, that's a great point. I really think Erin Quinn Gaucho should be celebrated for that. Has connected with the Nisqually on crafting that, and Erin really was instrumental in starting this conversation about getting this policy moving forward. So I do want to just thank her for her work and efforts on that.
Do we have it displayed in this building anywhere on a sign or anything?
So currently not, Vice Chair Brown, but the idea would be that once we have something that is adopted for the land acknowledgement, to incorporate it with our Nisqually Tribe Accord. So as you walk in City Hall right here to the left, you'll see the totem, and then on the wall, there is a copy of the accord between the city of Lacey and the Nisqually Indian tribe. And so the idea would be to have, whether it's the full or the abbreviated incorporated on that wall as people walk into City Hall in the future.
Well, thank you so much, Shannon. My question kind of is along with Cliff. I had a long conversation with Shannon today. And my question was, what's the origin of these land acknowledgements? 3 or 4 years ago, they just popped up everywhere you went, every conference, every meeting. Were they initiated by the tribes or were they initiated by others? That was my kind of question. So what you're going to send us answers some of that. And then the various models show the difference in how different people have used different language. And the one you showed for University of Washington, Tacoma, they made some reference to history of forced removal. That was one of my concerns. We can't acknowledge the land and truly be fair to our indigenous brothers and sisters if we don't acknowledge the forced removal from their land onto reservations. So that kind of thing was in my mind. And so thank you for digging that up in the last 3 hours of the day. Because if Lacey is going to adopt a land acknowledgement statement and a policy, with us being so near to several tribes, we need to do that. And the fact that this draft language was shared by the Nisqually, that's fine with me. If it's fine with them, but as an equity committee member, I just want to make sure we're being as fair and as equitable in this language as we possibly can. So it's one thing to acknowledge, but what do we do with it? And just to point out a couple of things in the draft that I had a question about. In the second paragraph, we acknowledge and we acknowledge, comma, and remember. What we're really talking about there is we acknowledge, comma, remember, and must not forget those tribal people. I mean, I'm just interested in seeing this strengthened. We must not forget those tribal people that are named but recognized today and who were absorbed. Little things like that, but that must not, that strengthens something in what we're trying to say. Somehow to incorporate that term of history of forced removal. And the only place I saw we could do that was in that next one. We acknowledge, strike that comma, indigenous people who called the land home before the arrival of settlers. And I say who took the land by force and aggression. But maybe history of forced removal is a better way to say that. And we're acknowledging, you know, this is the history, this is what happened. And I didn't know what this last sentence in the next paragraph, the relationship helps people heal from the past and learn how not to inflict new wounds today. Are we talking about indigenous people? Are we talking about the rest of us? Who's healing here? It wasn't clear to me. And how not to inflict new wounds today. So that's the rest of us you know, occupy the sacred land that was there. So that was a question for me. Then that last part, we recognize and respect indigenous people as traditional stewards of this land and acknowledge the tribal governments and their role today in taking care of these lands. So does that mean that they have a say-so in how the rest of us are ruining the land, cutting trees, ruining the waterways? I just needed to make sure that as this is adopted, that there's meaning to these words, because we don't want them to be like the treaties we backed out on. But if the Nisqually drafted this and it's okay with them, it's like, who am I to question it? But once it becomes policy, once it becomes the statement for the city, and by virtue of the fact that this commission is being asked to review it and give comment, I just thought I would share those thoughts by way of discussion. Am I making any sense?
Yeah, Chair Jackson, you bring up some really good points, and I think let's start with it's paragraph 4, which is talking about the relationships. And I think it's important that it says we recognize the relationships that exist between Indigenous people and their traditional territories. So that's the first relationship that's referenced there is the history that's been there time immemorial. That they have religious significance with the land, that they are tribes and they are also governments, right? So it's a government to government relationship. They have self-determination, identity, and economic factors, right? So impacting, beyond the tribe and in the greater Thurston County, Washington national area. And so the relationship, again, recognizing between the Indigenous people and the land helps people heal from the past. And I think the idea for the new wounds for today goes across the board. It's, everybody learning and applying those types of lessons. Certainly something, I'd love to hear other perspectives on from the Commission on Equity, but I just wanted to tie, the first reference to the relationships and making sure that it's really emphasizing that connection with the land And that is, what the land acknowledgement is stating is there is a relationship between the indigenous tribes and the land that we are really on today.
And it's a small thing, but under the abbreviated one, where we talk about, we acknowledge and remember those tribal people not recognized today that were absorbed. To change the word that to who, that sounds like an object. Who sounds like people. Recognize today who were absorbed instead of that. It's little, but it has a different meaning. We're talking about precious human beings who, not a thing, but people.
And on that same sentence in the abbreviated one, the lengthened one is people who were absorbed and relocated into other tribes for survival. We recognize the ancestors and their descendants that are still here. Part of what we recognize is the people who have been scattered, but this, the first one also talks about the people who are still here. So I think both of those things would need to be in the abbreviated.
And with that same sentence, that same paragraph that Annie just spoke to end that sentence, other tribes from survival, period. And for this next one to stand out stronger, to say, we recognize the ancestors and their descendants that are still here, as opposed to kind of a closure of a long sentence there. That is so critical. The ancestors and descendants that are still here. So it was just looking for ways that if we truly were trying to acknowledge, to strengthen it as much as we could as neighbors to our indigenous brothers and sisters. Any other comment? Anyone that's online? I'm not seeing any hands.
We have a couple of hands.
Oh, okay.
Chair Jackson, we've got
Elena, I see your hand.
Hi, yes. I apologize in advance if this is already answered, but I was looking for it. I didn't think so, but I will ask anyway. I remember we were discussing a little bit about having some abbreviations for land acknowledgements. For the abbreviations that we currently have or are in the process of forming, I believe that these need to be very similar to what Ms. Jackson was saying, heavily approved on by the Native community that we are acknowledging to ensure that we aren't missing out on any information, or even for them to provide these abbreviations would be good. My question was, just are we ensuring that these abbreviations are approved and still consist of all of the desired information the tribes are hoping that we acknowledge?
Yeah, Commissioner Blackburn, that's a great question. And what I'll start off by saying is, again, we received the draft, the full and the abbreviated, working with a representative from the Nisqually tribe. And our intent is to take, what we're hearing today, incorporating that and then sending it back to get some additional feedback and see if there's any recommendations or, desired changes, and then coming back to a future Commission on Equity to take a look at that again. So this is I would say the second of many steps still to come. And the first step really started with, getting some language, writing the policy, and then, sending it back and getting some additional feedback, and then coming here to this body. And the idea would be to continue that conversation and dialogue before moving it forward.
Okay, yeah, awesome. I just I hear a reoccurring a topic amongst all of us, and I feel like we can all kind of agree that whatever we take back to the people that are approving this is that the Commission on Equity wants to make an emphasis on the fact that whatever we do is approved by the tribes, whatever abbreviations, whatever say, whatever we acknowledge, all of these things are approved of, and we're not missing anything that needs to be said, or adding things that are inappropriate, or just things like that. I feel like we all collectively really want to emphasize that their opinions and what's important to them is number one priority. if that makes sense.
Absolutely, Commissioner Blackburn, and that's really what the city wants to do with this process is, we don't really want to move forward if we're not getting, support from the Nisqually tribe.
Thanks, Elena's. Kim, your hand is up.
Thank you. So I saw earlier as you were going through the document that there were some events, occasions where this is not recommended. And that was for events held by other organizations. Does that mean like that, I mean, you're not imposing to others, but it's also, you're just leaving it up to them without making any kind of recommendation, anything like that?
Correct, Commissioner Sauer, how the language is drafted in the policy is that not asserting or suggesting the use of land acknowledgements. You know, this is something again that the city wants to do to kind of, like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, to really work on, you know, the relationships and showing the history of everything that's going on, and to let other organizations and bodies, you know, figure out what is, you know, if they want to have a land acknowledgement, what the land acknowledgement is that they want to have and what that looks like. So really making that up to the organization who is hosting the event or the meeting.
So for example, you know, in the spring, Juneteenth, City of Lacey was, you know, participating, and we weren't the organizers. So if they decide not to, then that's their choice, basically, right?
Correct, Commissioner Sauer.
Mhm.
But if it was a city event, and again, I'll use the upcoming light parade. That would be an event where, you know, in the future, if this was to be passed, there would be a moment for an acknowledgement at a city event.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Makita, your hand is up.
Yes, well, first of all, I wanted to apologize for not being on time today. And so I did miss quite a bit of what was shared. I just wanted to also tag on to the very last thing that you guys were talking about, where it said something about the descendants and some grammatical issues that Commissioner Jackson had mentioned, where it was talking about descendants of. I might want to go back and revisit that, maybe after it's revised, because I think that still may sound a little off, where it says descendants of past and present. Maybe that's where it needs to go. I can't remember the exact passage, and I do need to take a little bit more time to take a look at that, just to kind of be able to give some insight to it, maybe after the meeting. At some of the wording, just to be able to give my 2 cents on that as well before it goes forward.
Well, it will be coming back to us, so we will have additional time to chew on it some more, once a few other things are incorporated and we hear back from the tribe and those kinds of things. So we aren't approving tonight. We are just discussing the draft that's before us. So thank you for that.
Got it. And I'll look at it again and see if I can attribute anything else to it as well.
Okay, great. John, your hand had been up. Do you still want to say anything? I guess not. Okay.
Is
Any
this-
further discussion?
Is this going back to the Squaxin tribe? Tribal members?
Not so far, but we'll certainly send it after our next round of revisions and see if we can get some feedback from the Squaxin tribe as well.
So the only other thing I would say is that as we review those models you shared with us, that language that was in UWT about the history of forced removal. I think that's significant. Maybe the tribes don't, but if the city is going to go in that direction, I think that would be an important acknowledgement for our indigenous brothers and sisters.
Right. That's what the Madison Creek Treaty was all about. You move there, you move here.
And when I first came here in 1971, the state was in the middle of the Madison Creek Treaty battle. And it was quite contentious, and it resulted in the Boat decision that restored Native American fishing rights. But it was mean, it was ugly, it was very divisive. And I remember that, it was, so it was the treaty being violated that, took the high court. And so I just think we need to take extra care as the city adopts this and make sure it's something they can live with.
Take responsibility.
Yes, and be held accountable for. So thank you for that extra work you did since our conversation today.
Well, I appreciate the feedback from all of you commissioners, and it's certainly helpful, and we'll be taking a look at the language. And like I said, we will run all of this again by the Nisqually tribe, and we'll reach out to the Squaxin tribe as well, and it'll come before the Commission on Equity again. So thank you for the feedback tonight.
Great. That takes us into item 4B, art plan and utility wrap project overview.
So a few commission meetings back, there were some questions about public arts and our public art plan. And I believe it was Commissioner Clay who raised some of the questions. And so I wanted to take the opportunity tonight to circle back to what the city's art plan is, and then to also talk about a forthcoming project that we wanted some feedback from the Commission on Equity on. So let me share my screen here. Included in your packet tonight was the policy and procedures manual. And this is the manual that I was referencing earlier when we were talking about the land acknowledgement. And it includes the section on the city's current public art policy, which was last reviewed in 2021. So just to give you some background on public art here in the city of Lacey. So there are a couple of references that create the public art fund that the city has. So there is a designated fund for public art. And the first one is resolution 1105. And what this resolution does is it sets aside $1 per capita for art here in the city of Lacey every single year. So if you look at table A here, I'm giving you kind of an estimation of the city of Lacey's population. It's actually a little bit higher than what's showing here. But you can see that the dollar set aside below is a $58,000 annually that gets put into the art fund. And then there's ordinance 1022, which sets aside 1/4 of 1% for public art for city projects visible and usable by the public over $500,000. So these are, fairly large capital projects that you have to include that within the budget, that 1/4 of 1%. The exemptions, though, to this ordinance are for streets and utility projects. Those are visible and usable by the public, but they do not need to have a set aside for public art. So a good example of the public art ordinance of the 1/4 of 1% is going to be the upcoming new police station. So that will have a art set aside for artwork in the interior or exterior of that building. So you can see table B kind of showing an example of that 1/4 of 1% allocation. So if it was a $500,000 project, the set aside for public art would be, $1,250. If it ends up being a $40 million project, for example, there would be a set aside of around $100,000 for public art. Importantly, through this process, the city council retains final authority for the selection and placement of art in the public right of way and on city property. But that doesn't mean that the city council wouldn't use advisory boards such as this one, or even an ad hoc task force for art, for example, to select art in the future. So as part of the policy that was provided in your packet, are the objectives of the arts in the city. And so the objectives are to define city boundaries or entryways into the community, to create a sense of community, identity, and character, to reflect Lacey's history, heritage, community values, and culture, to provide interactive opportunities for the general public, provide a pleasing living, working, and playing environment, enhance economic development and attract visitors, provide sustainable maintenance and operation costs. So this one, just a side note, obviously you construct something, that doesn't mean you're done with it. There is maintenance and operation, so taking that into account in advance to make sure that we are, not creating something that becomes so incredibly cumbersome that in the future it's not a sustainable art project. Opportunities for civic engagement, and a new addition in the latest time that we went through this was to evoke a sense of fun. So the idea is that you don't need to hit all of these objectives, but you need to hit at least one or a few of these objectives with public art here in the city. There's also themes outlined in the art policy, and the themes are natural beauty, the history of the community, the importance of family and youth, Northwest artifacts, including indigenous arts, salmon, orca, fishing, and timber, historic reproduction, the rich diversity of the community, and the exceptional military service and the community's connection to the military are themes in the art policy. There's also identified locations, and not like specific locations, but where art should be targeted to be put in the city. And that includes medians on arterial streets that identify entrances to the city. So again, a way to say, hey, we're in City of Lacey, and City of Lacey likes to have a sense of fun, right? Activity hubs, so think of business districts. So our, Midtown, for example, is a place that would be great for public art, commerce centers, residential areas, roundabouts or traffic devices that complement those devices and also enhance the environment around them. City-owned civic buildings and grounds. So, we talked about, the new police station, for example, here at City Hall, out at the Senior Center, the Virgil S. Clarkson Senior Center. On parks and trails, as well as other publicly owned spaces, and on utility structures maintained by the city to include, importantly for tonight's conversation, utility boxes, but other, utility infrastructure as well, such as poles, sidewalks, maintenance, pole covers, etc. So the picture I'm showing you here is something that our special projects administrator, Kelly Adams, put together when looking at the art policy. And what you see identified in the circles are all of the roundabouts in the city. What you have in the kind of golden squares are all of the entrance spots. So really creating a map to guide future art decisions on the criteria that's listed in the policy. So this is just a helpful tool to take a look at for future decision making. Just generally for the procedures and how art moves forward. So the city maintains an existing catalog of art pieces. So you can actually go onto our website right now and look up arts, public art in the city, and you'll pull up all of our existing pieces. And we really want to make sure that we highlight kind of the history of the art and who the artist is. And if there is, say, for example, a community member being represented, what the history of the community member is and where to learn more information. Maintain the map representing the locations of those existing art pieces. So you can again go onto the website and it'll show you where all of the public art in the city currently is. And then to develop a list of places that art could be placed over the next 6 years. And part of the art plan too was to try to identify a comprehensive plan on what type of art programs we could have moving forward. And to keep updating this, so that we're up to date on where art could be placed and what type of art is out there in the community. To solicit for art pieces pursuant to our city purchasing policies, and then to take art to our community relations committee for an initial review on solicitations and get some direction on recommendations that would then, like I mentioned earlier, go to the city council for eventual approval. Now, the city council again could always task an advisory body, with reviewing that as well moving forward. And then, like I said earlier, that the city council would review and approve any art that would go out into the community. So I just wanted to give an example. Every art piece is different on what its timeline looks like, but this is an example of a major art installation. And what this is really showing is that these pieces don't occur overnight. Some of the smaller ones, it's a lot easier to move forward quicker, but they involve multiple departments. So, not just say, for example, the city manager's office, but public works, parks, culture and recreation, community and economic development, finance. So it takes time to get art into the community. And so this is just, again, an example of a large arts project, but you can see year one starting over on the left-hand side, where it starts with a budget process, right? So first having that adopted art plan to move forward. And then, if there is a ad hoc art committee, that is certainly a tool that could be used in the future. There isn't one currently, and there's no art commission, but that is something that has been contemplated in previous conversations for when we're doing some larger scale art pieces. Soliciting for the artist or the art, and that can take time. Certainly artwork doesn't happen overnight, so giving artists the opportunity to develop their proposals. And then selecting the proposals through, a committee or other type of review, bringing it in front of the city council. And then that moves into year two. And while all of that is going on, you can see with the bottom teal arrow, there's a lot of planning and review that also needs to happen here at the city level, again, with public works, finance, city manager, community and economic development. So really making sure that all of the pieces are together to get a large piece of artwork installed in a public space, or even if it's on a city-owned facility. And then construction, really not occurring until, year 1.5 and going into year 3. And then, we have the ribbon cutting, which is a great celebration, but also recognizing, as you can see here on the year 3 and beyond, the ongoing maintenance, like I mentioned earlier, is something that, is part of the art plan to consider to make sure that it is a sustainable art piece moving forward. So not every piece of art, again, goes on this timeline, but this is just an example of what a larger piece of art could take getting through the process. Like I mentioned, we do have the art webpage, and so that is available for everybody to take a look at right now. So you can see all of the art that the city owns out in the public. You can learn information on that art piece. And so as an example, I've highlighted Cultivating the Future, which is the piece of Nat and Thelma Jackson, created by Jennifer Coons. And you can see the picture of the piece of the art, and when you click on it, you can learn history about Nat and Thelma Jackson and what they've done in the community, and then have links to more information on our parks page. And you can also see over here, you can see a map of where all those pieces are located if you wanted to go and tour every single piece of public art here in the city. So, something that has been discussed is in the future, bringing together an ad hoc art committee for large pieces of art that would help evaluate that large piece, and then to use that as a springboard for maybe evaluating a future art commission. So as part of, an ad hoc body, we really want to get diverse voices from the community. accounting for a variety of community stakeholders, such as a community, city council representative, business owners, community members, residents, a nonprofit or cultural organization lead, youth council member. We'd certainly want to hear from our youth voices and get some youth perspectives. And then also representatives from the artist or the art curator world to be on an ad hoc body for larger pieces of art moving forward.
Before you move from that, Shannon.
Yeah.
You say Art Commission requires additional staff time not currently accounted for or contemplated?
Or contemplated. Yes, yep. I think that's exactly what that was supposed to be. And really, that's just to highlight, having an advisory body does take resources and it does take time. And that's not something that at this point in time, there is a budgeted position that would be able to take up overseeing an ad hoc art committee or a future commission for art.
So that's never, versus to say accounted for nor contemplated at this time. Has it been ruled out completely? Because this is quite an ambitious art plan with the museum on the board and, the city growing like crazy. Might there be a contemplated art commission in the future?
Chair Jackson, I certainly think that is going to be conversations that the city council will have in the future. And I think, when we start working towards that first major piece, we're going to talk about, kind of a smaller piece in the plan. Getting a ad hoc body together, I think that'll be the springboard where we can really evaluate, hey, moving forward, what do we need? What does this look like? And how best could we, have a future budget request if that's, ultimately what we move forward with. So I think it'll certainly be coming up in future conversations.
Okay, that just sounded so finite there. Not currently accounted for nor contemplated. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have a question
Yeah.
regarding the timeline, would be a couple of years, 3 years. We have some major projects, the museum, the police station. Will the art be, RFP go out? So it's being worked as the building's being built. So when the building opens, the art is already there as part of the final plan, or do we have to wait a year or two after it's complete and open before the art shows up?
Yeah, so Vice Chair Brown, it's one of those things where you need to know kind of what the space is that you have the dynamics to work in before you can solicit for art. So there is kind of a push-pull, right? You can't go right at the start of a project and say, I'm looking for an art piece that fits in, you don't know what space it is. So knowing kind of what parameters you have is helpful, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you wait until the very end of a large capital project. It might be after design is done that you start, hey, we've got design, now we want to move forward, we've got the space, dimensions. And so certainly starting that process, not waiting for complete construction of a building to come back and potentially do some additional work on top of that. So with the police station, that is certainly something that we should start having those conversations now.
Right.
Not necessarily going out and soliciting art, but I think just making sure that we have that on the radar for future conversations and, when would be the best time to really kick that process off.
Good answer.
About the budget, so 58,000 plus, depending on the population. Like this year, did we spend $58,000? Or is there a fund that accumulates if we don't spend it? And how are we doing on the budget?
Yeah, so Commissioner Clay, it's not a use it or lose it. It's a restricted fund, right? So it's going in there. And so we certainly hope to use it soon. And that's part of why we wanted to put together a comprehensive art plan, is to say, if we're looking 6 years out, what is going to be the best use of funds? Moving forward, thinking, more comprehensively and strategically, but also wanting to make sure that we have ample funds should we want to add an additional item to the art plan. One thing I will say about the art plan that we are about to go over is I was overly aggressive with the art plan, and I want to recognize that. And so we're going to have to modify it slightly moving forward, knowing that you know, there's the resources and time that currently we have to put into the art program. So what we're going to review, I just want to say with the caveat that we're going to have some modifications because I was overly excited about the art here in the city. So
You like art, huh?
So as part of the 6-year adopted art plan, what we tried to do, which Commissioner Clay, this goes to the question you asked about that funding, it was to create a sustainable plan for the next 6 years. And so one thing we contemplated, as you can see here, are some of the projects that we wanted to undertake. And then this middle column right here is art funding only. So that means that we only get resources from the resolution and the ordinance that I just outlined. The second column over here is if we were to get other funding sources for art. So that could be anything from grant funding to lodging tax dollars. There are other revenue sources that the city may be able to pursue should, you know, the timing in the art piece, donations, etc. So what you can see here are the anticipated years in which those projects are going to occur. But like I just mentioned, was overly zealous in my planning and need to scale it back slightly to really reflect the bandwidth and capacity that we currently have. So some large ones that I want to point out are potential reader board and gateway art. So the idea with this is that as you drive into some of the major locations in the city of Lacey, you would have a reader board, which would provide information on city activities and events with art incorporated around it. So you kind of get two elements of communication and then also just something that is, you know, meaningful and pretty while you're communicating points. And then just a gateway art without the reader board in some locations. So some of maybe the still major entrances, but not the two biggest ones, having some gateway art welcoming people saying, hey, you are now in the city of Lacey and we appreciate art. Banners is the next one, and banners, these are flags essentially that hang from light poles and power poles. Here in the city, it's going to be light poles, but you can't see them hanging from in certain jurisdictions on light power poles, excuse me. And so the city was awarded some lodging tax funds for banners for this year. And so we are hoping to actually show the city council and committee some examples of the banners that we want to order before the end of the year, using some of the funding we were awarded from the LTAC, but also some of the art funds as well to supplement it. And so these banners are, again, going to be placed in areas that would welcome individuals to the community and really emphasizing, given that the funding source was LTAC funds, all of the great things you can do while you're here in the city of Lacey. So really showing a diversity of events, programs, et cetera, that anybody coming in, and whether they're living here, they're working here, or they're visiting here, could partake in. Utility wraps is another one that we are looking to do, starting with this conversation that we're about to have on the utility wraps in just a second. But the idea is that, you know, with most of our light fixtures, there are large utility boxes, and, you know, in a lot of states, they're kind of silver, metal, or black. And so really taking that opportunity to kind of spruce them up and have an exciting and inviting piece of artwork shown on those utility boxes. And then some additional projects moving forward, the honor wall. So the honor wall would be located in Civic Plaza, so which is just outside of the shopping center. There are currently a bunch of flags for all of the armed forces, as well as you know, the U.S. flag and the City of Lacey flag. And the idea with the honor wall is that we're getting a Blue Star Memorial placed at Civic Plaza, and that's being performed by a Thurston County nonprofit, the Blue Star Memorial Group. And so in addition to that, we want to take the Gold Star, excuse me, all of the Gold Star recipients and have a wall with all of their names for Thurston County included on Civic Plaza where those flags are. So that is the honor wall. The Jackson art piece, which again is the Cultivating the Future. So that piece is now hanging in our community center. A Compassionate City art piece. So the city is involved in Compassionate Communities program, and this is a partnership with North Thurston Public Schools as well as our local chambers. And so really celebrating all of the great work that they have been doing in the community, I believe over the last 4 years of doing the Compassionate City program. And this is really a program where it's trying to energize the community to do great things in the community. So this year, as well as last year, their theme was 1,000 acts of kindness. So getting community members to send information on all of the volunteering that they're doing in the city and recognizing all of those efforts. Bear art replacement. This is currently a piece that is out front of the Lacey Timberland Library and has been out in front of the Lacey Timberland Library since the building of the library. It's a wood piece, and over time wood breaks down. And so just having some sort of replacement art piece for what is currently there with the bear art. Having a new piece of art in a park somewhere. There has been some discussion on a Sasquatch art piece, but really that art piece is more of something that would go into a park somewhere. So it's not determined, but that there have been some conversations on it. A project with the Nisqually Indian tribe. And then like we've talked about here, just in the past, a art piece that would go in the police station as well. So what was presented to the Lacey City Council last year around this time was the 6-year art plan, taking into account all of the art that potential art pieces that I just went over, and planning it out over time, trying to be strategic and sustainable with the art funding sources. So what this is showing you here are, again, all of those arts pieces that we just talked about, where the funding revenues are coming from. So you can see you've got the revenue from the resolution and the funding from the ordinance, and then talking about the total revenues and then what's spent and then what the balance is. So Commissioner Clay, I think you were asking the question of, well, what does the art fund look like right now, right at this moment? It's around $200,000. And so, you know, our utility wrap project that I'm about to talk about, as well as our banner project, will draw down slightly from that. But you can see that there is going to still be a sizable fund moving forward. But the idea is that we never want that to be a zero fund. We always want to have funding available should an art opportunity present itself. So really the idea with this plan is to just be more comprehensive, to show what kind of planning is involved, have the spacing that we just talked about of, hey, the timeline doesn't happen overnight, and really give direction on what needs to be started to be worked on right now. As you can see, we really need to start working on the Compassionate City art piece. That's one of the next ones that's coming up, along with the police station. So certainly things that we'll be having additional conversations here moving forward on. Just again, showing kind of with the public art plan, this one was on the adopted public art plan, the Cultivating the Future, the Nat and Thelma Jackson art piece. And that was such a great event we had this last October. So I just want to give you some examples of some of the art pieces, just to kind of show you what we're thinking about, not necessarily to say that these are coming to our community, but just to give kind of some background. So this could be a gateway art example, and something with a screen right here giving information to the community on whether it's an emergency like this one showing, or if there is upcoming events or programs or city council meetings or commission on equity meetings, but getting that information out into the community. This is an example of a gateway art sign, without a screen. So just really something that shows, you've come into the city of Lacey and we're really excited to be here and all of the great things that are going on in the community. So another example of gateway art, and what you'll notice is a lot of them look very different. So, kind of the sky's the limit on what this could look like in the future. Banner examples. These are some banners from jurisdictions actually really close here in Washington. So we've got some examples from Lakewood, and then we also have some examples actually from Iowa celebrating the Tulip Festival. Another example of banners. They're actually pretty large when you see them. They don't look incredibly large, but they can be fairly big. Utility wraps. So just a couple of examples of what those look like. Which takes us to kind of the conversation I wanted to have with the Commission on Equity here tonight is the utility wrap project for 2022 and 2023. As you can see with the 6-year art plan, we did anticipate having the utility wraps this year, but we're going to kick it off here in 2022 and hopefully actually have a celebration of the utility wraps being placed in 2023. So something we are thinking of doing and are here tonight to get some feedback from the Commission on Equity on is that we want to use the utility wraps to highlight important voices representative of the community, both past and present, as well as future, I think, to throw that out there as well. So the idea would be that we would select 10 to 15 individuals or groups or organizations to recognize them for their impact on the community. And so we're not here tonight necessarily to select those individuals, but that would certainly be something that would come back, for the Commission on Equity to have another discussion on. We would go out and solicit a request for qualifications from artists. So this basically asks artists like, hey, what have you done in the past? Can you show us some examples? And from that, we would select a handful of artists. So the idea would be that for every utility box, there would be a different artist. So that way we can really increase, representation in the community of a variety of voices and then also a variety of artists. Have the artists create 2 designs per, the individual or organization or group that's selected. And then with those 2 designs, be able to go out to the community and pull them for their preference for the art in the community. So that way, their voice is also included as part of this process. And then also to use that survey as an opportunity to get more feedback from the community on additional individuals or groups or organizations that should be considered for future rounds of utility wrap projects. Knowing that, we're going to cover 10, to 15 boxes, and there are lots of boxes throughout the community. So lots of opportunities to get public art. And something we want to include on the utility boxes once they are wrapped is a QR code that would take people to that public art page so they can learn more about who is being shown on the utility wrap boxes, so they can learn the history of what kind of impact they've had on the community or continue to have on the community.
So the QR code is not to the organization or group, or it is to the arts page?
It would go to the arts page, and we'd certainly welcome, having additional links that might take, individuals interested out to, if it is an individual that's being highlighted, if they have a page, or also the artist, for example, too, like being able to have that connectivity to celebrate, getting more information about who's being celebrated in the community. So as far as the concept, we think this fits really well with the objectives and the themes, and we would identify, locations that were meaningful for the community members. So, pairing them up with, maybe some areas or buildings or, developments that they had a direct impact on. So, for example, I'm going to use the Cultivating the Futures one more time as an example here. So the art piece of Nat and Thelma Jackson, taking that art piece and putting it on a wrap close to Goose Pond or the community center. So that way people, you know, who walk by and see it can scan it and say, hey, I can actually go see this art piece in the community center while learning more about Nat and Thelma Jackson and the impact they've had on the greater Lacey community. So that is our kind of general idea for the utility box campaign. And so I'm just here tonight to get some feedback from the commission and have a conversation about that.
The art boxes are, you know, made a decision to do it about people or organizations that have made a difference, not just art with our themes of water and trees and whatnot. So,
Yeah. That's the idea, Commissioner Clay, and that's what I'm here to have a conversation with. That's what, you know, we were thinking for our initial round and, you know, a couple of future rounds to really celebrate the history and voices of the community and get that information out for individuals.
Where I've seen those utility wraps, they really are nice. You pull up to a stop sign or a stoplight and what would have been, you know, just something you didn't pay any attention to, the art on it all just captures your attention. And I've seen those over in Olympia. Those would be really good. The one art medium, I was looking back here, under discretionary art projects, was there any thought given to murals?
So for the discretionary art projects, what I'll say is they haven't necessarily been selected what it is. It's more of just the concept of, hey, this is the idea. This is generally, you know, who we want to work with or what we want to celebrate in the community. But we're not necessarily selecting a medium for all of those. So I think murals is certainly, you know, something that could come up in future conversations for art pieces.
I'm thinking in terms of how diverse the city of Lacey is. And if there's some big space somewhere that shows all of this diversity of people playing whatever, and visually, it would carry such an impacted message to see. Well, but it could be one of those high maintenance things too. So, you know, but so I'm just asking the question, might future murals on some big surface somewhere be appropriate? That would be all as encompassing as this diverse community, children, young folk, old folk, Black, white, indigenous people, Latinos, Asians, to show the diversity of this community as people are riding around, and it would speak volumes to people.
Yeah,
Really
or
speak
along a
volumes.
walking trail, if there was, you
Somewhere,
could
yeah.
put some.
I don't know
That'd be nice.
what's involved there, but I was just looking at, you know, the honor wall and this kind of thing. And you see in some cities, there are murals that have been painted in parks or whatever. And it really sends a powerful message. But
Yeah, I've seen something like that in the Dalles. They actually had a group, of course, they had to apply, and they had selected a couple of different sides of a couple of different buildings. Now, I don't know how they chose the buildings, but they made a whole thing of it. I was one of the vendors at the event, and there was so many pictures of, you know, cherries, which is kind of what they're known for. They have the cherry festival and stuff out there. That would be kind of cool. I need to find out from their chamber how they actually went about applying and getting the attention of that organization, but that would be something nice. And those were murals as well.
I just kick out murals as something to think about in the future, you know. But the question you raised about the wrapped utility boxes, I think that would be great. Who or what's on it, you know, that's another conversation, but the idea of wrapping these gray and black and whatever silver boxes would add a lot of public art that took a little effort I shouldn't say little effort, but you know what I mean. Lots of opportunity for a number of different artists to be displayed on those wrap utility boxes. So what other kind of indication are you needing or asking for us on the issue of the wrap utility boxes?
Yeah, Chair Jackson, just general consensus that it sounds like it's a good thing to pursue. And like you mentioned, we'll be coming back if it is before this body, you know, to actually take a look at some of the individuals, groups, organizations that were selected and then move forward with the process.
Great. And, you know, to have it representative of the diverse population that we have, and would hope that we would try to focus on local artists. And we have a lot of artists. in
Yeah.
town.
That's
Talking with the artist, the mosaic artist, she was giving some suggestions about how to actually have artists format in order to go around a box, and some just technical details about it.
Yeah, no, the artist Jennifer Coons, who did the Cultivating the Future, had some really good feedback, and certainly will be picking their brain in the future because they've designed utility box wraps before. But also they brought up a really good point of you know, not making it a popularity contest amongst artists, but having kind of the pick of, again, like the two examples from a single artist. So it's not just, you know, somebody who has a large following, you know, getting votes, but really
Right.
having the ability for that artist to be shown in the preferred wrap, you know, for the community.
Then too, we could have someone, say, provide a photo or something, information to the artist who then develops that and then does the wrap.
Yep, yeah, that's absolutely the goal, is that we'd be working with Erin Quinn Valcho, again, from the museum, and their team on putting together information, so that way the artist, you know, gets the individual, the organization has kind of a cheat sheet, not to say they can't do more research on their own, but, you know, has images, has information, and can really create the art from that information in addition to anything they want to augment it with.
Right, yeah, it doesn't have to all be original art, it could be something they take and develop it nicely. Yeah, like that.
And the QR code is great. That's really just easy,
You
walking
can-
around.
Driving along and go,
Yeah.
take a picture
Find
of,
out more.
you got it.
Or come to the Borough Park Drive down the street. I need to get a picture of that QR
Yeah,
code.
right.
Do a U-turn.
Jump out.
Yeah,
But it sounds like a great plan that's gotten a lot of good thoughtful consideration.
Yeah.
And I think it creates a real opportunity to show the diversity of the city of Lacey.
Great, well, we will be back in front of you with some more information on that then.
I don't see any hands up. Okay. Thank you. Then that takes us to item 4C. Our ongoing project, our strategic diversity, equity, inclusion plan workshop.
Right, well, this is our fifth workshop as we are continuing to craft the strategies, the benchmarks. And so I know in the past I've gone through each and every one of the slides in your packet, but since we have done that a number of times, if it's okay with the commission, I'll just move forward to taking a look at the next goal area and reviewing the benchmarks.
Please.
Perfect,
Thank
all
you.
right. All right, so for today, we're taking a look at our third of 4 goal areas. So previously we looked at workforce and work environment, which was our first goal. And then our second goal area was community access and engagement. And that leads us here tonight to take a look at policies, programs, and services. And so our fourth and final goal area that I hope we get to in December is livability. So I just want to recognize that that's coming up, but for today, just focusing on the policy programs and services. And so, like we've done with our other sections, the idea would be right off the bat for this chapter in the diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic plan to provide some additional high-level information on, what city efforts are being done. And so for this particular goal area, I would recommend that we include the reference to the city appendix. We've obviously heard a lot from various departments on some of the ongoing activities, but to leave out human resources and communications, because those will be emphasized as part of the other two goal areas and focus on a lot of the activities that are being done in other departments such as community economic development, public works, finance, et cetera, in this particular section. So highlighting things, for example, like some of the items we talked about last Commission on Equity meeting in the Housing Action Plan, ADU programs, et cetera. Including key terms that are relevant to this particular goal area. So for this one, having access, equity, intersectionality, marginalization, people of color, communities of color, power, power with, and respect. And again, the definitions provided here for the key terms would be from the OFM glossary. So I've included in your packets for tonight previous feedback on the draft strategies, just to kind of show what we previously said when we were looking at the strategies and then how they've been incorporated into the strategies as presented here tonight. But really the focus of tonight is to take a look at the benchmarks and the indicators for all of the strategies that have been identified. So before we get into that, any additions that should be made to the additional information page or the key terms right off the bat?
People of color or communities of color, we have both there. Is there not a preferred use?
That could be changed to BIPOC.
Yeah, and so what I will say to that is the people of color, community of color, I believe is what is in the DEI glossary. And Commissioner Blackburn, I believe the reference in there does also say BIPOC. So they're I believe referenced together, Vice Chair Brown.
Okay.
But I will certainly take a look.
You mean it says BIPOC under these key terms or in the DEI?
In the OFM definition for people of color or communities of color, I believe there is also definition for BIPOC as well. So it'd be
Okay.
part of the key terms here.
Okay, perfect.
All right, not hearing any, I'll continue. Any additional, I'll continue. So for integrate and reflect equity values in all policy, and we added and planning documents, for example, the budget, comprehensive plan, et cetera, to implement the equity framework tool to help guide policy and programming decisions to enhance equitable services, and to increasingly use this tool to inform policy and budgetary decisions. So the idea being that this would be something that would be filled out as part of the analysis that staff members would do on existing programs, new programs, future budget requests that could be used to help evaluate and make more informed decisions moving forward. Create an equity map that supports the equity framework tool. So again, something that could be used hand in hand with the tool that I just talked about, and for other city projects. So for example, maybe more of the capital construction side could also use this tool to help inform some of their program and policies and project decisions. The percent of budgets, policy and planning documents that incorporate, and that is a typo, so I'll take that S off there. Equity increases and eventually reaches 100%. So, going back to one of Chair Jackson's points very early on in this was to have the DEI strategic plan be a part of all future planning documents. And so that's really trying to get at, as we look at these documents and review them, revise them, overhaul them, create new policy documents that in the future equity items are incorporated into those planning documents moving forward. And then finally, support and resources for projects with a DEI emphasis increase annually. Any questions, comments with our first strategy?
Speak a little more about that number 4 you just read.
Sure. So I think, when you have the equity framework tool and the equity map, just showing kind of we're using the tool, and then it's showing in budget decisions and resource decisions moving forward. So it's not just we're using it, but it's also having impacts and outcomes.
And increasing annually. Okay. Good, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. All right, I'll move on to our next one. So this was city policies. So our next one is city services. And there were a number of things listed on here. So they're actually broken up onto 2 slides. So the first one, we'll just focus on items number 1 through 5, and then we'll turn to the rest of them here in just a second. So one thing I wanted to highlight when we're looking at the benchmarks and indicators is that a lot of the benchmarks and indicators for this particular strategy refer back to the community survey. And just as a reminder for those here or those who might be watching the meeting tonight, the idea with the community survey is that this would be something the city goes out and gets feedback on a biannual basis, so every 2 years, on how it's doing in certain areas. And certainly taking this opportunity to craft questions that are related not only to just general services, but also equity in the community as well, so we can have a benchmark moving forward amongst other types of indicators as well. So the strategy is provide services that are responsive, transparent, accountable, and welcoming, with an emphasis on providing a safe, trusted environment for underserved community members. I've highlighted underserved here because that is something that was brought up in some of the previous feedback for a change in that particular strategy. So you can see these are all community surveys. So I'm going to just read them all together, which is rating of city government increases and scores are consistent across demographics. Rating of overall direction that the city is taking increases. And again, scores are consistent across demographics. Rating of overall city customer services increases. Scores are consistent across demographics. Rating of the city treating all community members equitably increases. And scores are consistent across demographics. And then the 5th one here is rating of community sentiment regarding city transparency increases, and that scores are consistent across demographics.
This is a new survey.
Correct. We currently don't have it. So the first year is just going to be a baseline.
Yeah.
But then the idea would be moving forward that we would be able to increase the rating or positive rating on all of these items.
And that might go to every utility member or yeah, I mean, I think it needs to go out to everybody and instead of just some of the Parks Department surveys have, well, you can't make people fill out their survey, but the Parks Department, it seemed like they didn't hit everybody, meet everybody, let everybody have that opportunity. You could go on the website and pick it up and whatnot, but somehow, if this is going to be a real valid survey, it's really got to go to everybody.
Yeah, and so Commissioner Clay, what I'll say to that is it'll have to be a multi-pronged survey, right? So there's going to be multiple methods that you reach out to the community. And what's likely to happen, and this will certainly be something that will come back before the Commission on Equity for feedback before we go, we'll look at the questions, have a conversation about that, talk about, what the plan is to get the information out there in the community. But what likely is going to happen is there will be 2 surveys that go out, and one would be what we could call a controlled survey or a statistically valid survey. And so, that could be something where, names are generated. So that way it can be, it's not just anybody and everybody, but there is some control to the number and where people are being surveyed. And then to have a second one, which would be open to everybody. And that would be something that we'd want to push out on every single communication channel that we have. So that way we have something that is statistically valid and then something that is still meaningful and very useful, but might not be statistically valid. So we'll take a look at what that looks like and walk through, with the Commission on Equity, but that'll certainly be future conversations, and whether that's, mailings or phone conversations or, going out to where community members already are, it's likely going to be some combination of all of the above.
Yeah, and as a youth representative, I could definitely reach out to, all of the high schools and the, youth area of our community and kind of get that input and rolling into, our feedback through the surveys. What we could also do is send an email chain or phone call chain to all students and parents within the Northwestern Public Schools, which I've done in middle school for even littler things like fundraisers. So I'm sure that is definitely something that we could incorporate into this survey project.
Absolutely. And yeah, we will certainly want to take a look at everything and anything, right, that we can use as a communications platform. So thank you, Commissioner Blackburn.
On that number 4, is a word missing out of there? Is something isn't reading right?
I think it's a typo, and it should be rating of the city treating all community members equitably increases.
Rating of the city treating all community members
Equitably increases.
equitably increases. Okay.
Yep, I caught that one as well.
Okay, something wasn't reading right. Okay. Okay.
All right, well, we'll go on to the next few then for city services. And we've got a few more under the community survey. So we have rating of community city direction increases. Scores are consistent across demographics. And then also something that we've talked about before with the commission is taking a look at contracts and service agreements and what kind of language is included in our contracts and service agreements.
Right.
So having, equity values incorporated into future contracts and service agreements starts to happen and continues until it reaches 100%. Number 8 is that continuous full-time city contractors meet similar equity training standards or equivalent that the city is performing. And then number 9 is the city continues to raise awareness on city contracting processes and solicitation opportunities. So again, being able to get out in the community and, kind of walk through, show how you would sign up for our solicitation pages where you can get all the information, how you would go through the MBOE training and how you would get on rosters. So that way that information continues to get disseminated out into the community. Continue to evaluate removing barriers to accessing city services, and then increased number of city documents are readily accessible online. So making it a tool that people can go and find all of the information that they might be looking for.
City hands up, okay?
Okay, great. So we'll move on to public safety. And so there are a couple additions here in the strategy as well. So public safety services, for example, police, emergency management, animal control, and contracted court and public defender services reflect the community, build trusting relationships, and eradicate systems that negatively impact historically marginalized communities and low-income communities. And so for the draft benchmarks, we have the Lacey Police Department continues to publish reports on public safety with demographic data. The Lacey Police Department provides an annual update on policing statistics to the City Council and various advisory bodies. Then we've got a number of community surveys, and before I start reading them, I'll just say that for all of them, scores are consistent across demographics. So we've got positive rating of police services increases, positive rating of crime prevention increases, positive rating of animal control increases, positive rating of emergency preparedness increases, positive rating of court services increases. And that's where we'll pause for this one. Again, we have a few more, but they're on the next slide. So I'll take a pause right there.
I guess,
Comment.
yeah, I just think the emergency preparedness increases, that area is something that is very important. I think it is. Lacey is a low crime city, but the emergency preparedness, when these things happen across the country, is usually some mistakes on the part of public safety people. So not doing a job, not properly trained or whatever. So you know, those things, I would think there would be a policy already in place on emergency preparedness for the city, or separate, is there a separate policy on that?
So there's a number of policies, Vice Chair, and I think that's a great conversation for a future presentation
Yeah.
from our emergency manager. So
Mhm.
I'll write that down and get that on our agenda tracker for a future conversation.
Yeah, we don't want another Uvalde, you know, where you know, key individuals were not trained or didn't carry out their responsibilities. We want to make sure we're prepared. Being a small city. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, moving on to the next few, we have the Lacey Police Department Community Academy, which just graduated its first class after the pandemic. This is something that the Lacey Police Department had done for a long time, but had to take a break with the pandemic, but now is starting up again. So attendees increasingly match community demographics. Lacey Police Department continues to enhance community engagement efforts. The new Lacey Police Department station includes a community meeting space that can be used externally for community members, and continued enhancement of emergency preparedness community initiatives. All right, so we'll move on to Parks, Culture, and Recreation. So again, the strategy, and this is something that, you know, Jen has in the draft for the Parks Comprehensive Plan included as well. And I know we had a conversation on the language here, so I think it's important to take a look at this again. And that strategy is to provide robust and community-driven park and recreation resources where physical, financial, and social barriers to use are eliminated. And for the benchmarks and strategies we have, and these are the first four, and then there's 4 additional ones, is to increase ADA and other inclusive park amenities in our parks, to increase identified park culture and recreation levels of service. So as Jen pointed out in the previous comprehensive plan, and likely in the new round of comprehensive plan, it is a 10-minute active travel, so walk, roll, something else, to a park for all community members. Increase use and awareness of Recreation Scholarship Fund to ensure recreation programs are available to all. So this would certainly be something we want to highlight as one of our programs, is there is a scholarship that is available for our recreation programs at this point in time. So really making sure the community knows about it and continues to take advantage of it. And then the next 5 are going to be community survey. So the first one that's showing up here is the rating of park system increases. And for all of the community surveys, again, we want scores consistent across demographics. So we have for number 5, rating of recreation programs increases, 6, rating of community center increases, rating of city-sponsored events increases, and positive rating of culture programs increases. And I'll take a pause.
Looks good.
All right. Well, then I'll continue on. And again, the jam boards are going to be open for the next couple of weeks. So if something comes to mind in the future, please feel free to put a sticky note on there and I'll take a look at it. We'll try to incorporate that into the draft. So the next area is infrastructure, and the strategy is continue to increase equity across transportation modes and ensure all city facilities and other public assets are accessible and welcoming. So for our benchmarks and indicators, we have the percent of ADA infrastructure that is in the city increases. The percent of multimodal transportation infrastructure in the city increases. And then for community survey questions, and again, scores are consistent across demographics, the rating of city roadway increases, the rating and availability of paths and trails increases, the rating of the city's multimodal travel options, so again, walking, rolling, biking, etc., increases. And then the rating of Lacey's built environment increases, and the rating of the city's public places and city facilities increases.
What's the rating of Lacey's built environment? What is that? What?
Yeah, great
what does
question.
that mean?
So I think, that's taking into account, and certainly we probably want to provide a definition as part of, a future survey, but taking into account the road, the developments. So you're seeing the full build rather than one little tiny part of it, public facility buildings, trees in the landscape, things that you interact with kind of on a daily basis as you're navigating through the city.
The built environment. Mhm.
All right, I'll move on to utilities. And the strategy is continue to provide affordable, essential city utilities and collaborate with external partners to enhance services in the community. Our community survey question would be the rating of various city utility increases. So the city has multiple utilities and really kind of pinpointing each of those utilities and seeing if we need to look into those. And then a non-community survey question would be to increase use and awareness of utility discounts for low-income seniors and disabled community members. We currently have those discounts in place per code. So again, just continuing to get that information out to those who can take advantage of it. All right. Just as a reminder, the equity tool, we folded that into a benchmark under city policies rather than having a standalone item here. So that takes us to our last one, which is acknowledgements and events. And the strategy, which you can see we have incorporated again some of the feedback that was provided during our last review, is to recognize and support diversity and inclusiveness through acknowledgement statements, public art, events, programs, and use of city platforms to amplify community voices. So the community survey question is the rating of the city creating a welcoming environment increases. And then after that, we have the city adopts a land acknowledgement in collaboration with the Peoples of Medicine Creek Treaty, and the city continues to develop and enhance relationships with local Indigenous tribes. Public art increasingly reflects the community, and the community is increasingly involved in future public art initiatives. The city increasingly recognizes the contributions of communities of color and women in public spaces and on communication platforms. And the number and support for events and programming that highlights cultural diversity increases, and the number of opportunities for community dialogues on equity increases. And then the last one under this category is increased use of city platforms to recognize community businesses, nonprofits, and other community groups that positively impact Lacey.
The only thing I would question or add in there, where we're talking about under G, under strategy G. Have we stated in some other place here where city publications or whatever will reflect the diversity of the community?
Yeah, Chair Jackson, I think that is under our accessible communications, but I will
Okay,
certainly put a
okay.
sticky note and
Okay.
we can come back to that.
Great.
So Chair Jackson, for the diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic plan review, that's all I had for tonight. So we'll come back with the last goal area at our next meeting. And then we'll start taking a look at kind of the various other elements as we continue to put together
Great.
the plan.
We're getting there. We're getting there. It's been a huge undertaking. Their hand,
I do see Commissioner Blackburn has the hand raised.
Commissioner Blackburn, yes. Are you still there?
Muted.
Hey, yes, I am.
Is your hand up to comment on the plan?
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. I never put it down for my last question about the BIPOC communities. I apologize. No questions. We had a great meeting.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Very good. So that's all of the business before us, and that takes us to our commissioner reports. I wanted to bring us back to a couple of items from a couple of meetings back where we talked about following up on the focus groups that we wanted to do out there in the community, focus group / town hall, or whatever we want to call it. For us to think in terms of revisiting that in on our December agenda, and possibly looking at beginning to get those scheduled out there come January and on. And I think we commissioners have some responsibility there to think through how we think a focus group or a town hall might best work in the particular community constituency that we represent, as far as suggesting venues to the city or formats or whatever, because one size does not fit all. And what must we do differently from group to group to make sure the input is gotten that we want? So I think this is a place that us commissioners can play a much more participatory role than we have. So if we put this on the agenda for December and can be looking forward January and February of 2023 to actually make these happen. The other one that we had talked about was the North Thurston Public Schools and the equity officer, and to extend an invitation for them to be a part of our January meeting. In December, they're on winter break, but to put them on the agenda in January to get an update, be it Dr. Sandifer or the superintendent, whoever else. What is the status of some of the equity issues that the school district has been dealing with? And so that gives them time to know ahead of time if we're inviting them to our January meeting, since December won't be permissible. But those are the two things that I wanted to propose to the group so that we can get those two items back on our radar and get them moving in 2023.
Shannon, can we have available like a list of some of those groups that we had put on this form, so we can maybe select some that we want to target early on?
Yeah, so I'll make sure to send out in my update the dashboard to the community connectivity analysis, so you can take a look at, who we've identified on there at this point in time.
Good.
Absolutely.
And the only other thing I would comment on was our joint meeting with the Parks Board and that whole discussion. And I see we have a follow-up scheduled for them at some point in the future. Any comment from anybody about that discussion that took place?
I would.
Annie?
I would like to say, just kind of to clear the record up. There was something said at the meeting that I was uncomfortable with, or some talk that I was uncomfortable with, but I was aware that we were kind of heading into trouble, but I didn't have the clarity to say something. So I wish I had. I'm talking about the statements that were around whether we could tell if a restaurant or a potential sponsor was a right-wing Christian or even a Christian if they were closed on Sunday, that kind of talk. To me, it isn't and shouldn't be an issue whether a group who is sponsoring has some background in any kind of religion. It's the behavior of the group that we were taking issue with, and that part should be clear in the sponsorship process. I think Christians of all spectrums and other religions should also feel welcome in our community, and I felt like some of the comments were wrong-headed and not inclusive of what we wanted. So what I think I wanted to be really clear about is the behavior and the reputation of their actions that was the issue that some of us were uncomfortable with the city deciding to be associated with that. So that's I just wanted to kind of clear my head about that.
Any other comments from any other commissioner?
Yeah, this is Kim, and I appreciate you saying that because I was listening in. I happen to know Happy Teriyaki owner. We've been known them for many years, and them, whether they go to church on Sunday or not, I mean, that was basically their economical decision for not about, being going to church and stuff like that. So I think we need to be aware of like what we say a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that clarifies that. And when we meet again with them, we can make sure that was clear. Yeah. Any other?
I just want to say, I appreciate the director and her approach to it. She was really open and listened. I thought she's done a great job in reviewing organizations and things having a discretion to make some decision. I thought she's doing a great job. And I think that discussion and us, having input on that's gonna just encourage her to, hopefully will encourage her to just continue doing a great job, and knowing that, and I appreciate her, being willing to share, information with, her commission and us and others for input as those organizations are being reviewed. So I just thought, hats off to her. She had a great attitude about the whole thing. I hope she didn't feel like she was being beat up on or anything, but she's doing a great job there, I think.
Great. Anything else to come under commissioner reports? Hearing none, seeing none, we'll move to the director report.
All right, I only have a few of them.
You.
5. I just wanted to point out, we didn't have a work plan review today. I certainly want to bring forward a work plan for you all to take a look at for 2023 here in the future. Our joint meeting though with the Lacey City Council is scheduled tentatively at this point for March 9th. So if you all can take a look at your calendars in the next couple of days and let me know if that works for you. No, this is with the Lacey City Council. So it'd be our joint meeting with the Lacey City Council, just like we did last year, to talk about, some of the initiatives that we took on this year, and then also some of the things that we have planned to take a look at moving forward in 2023. So we'll certainly have a conversation with that next week, excuse me. Hopefully not next week, next month.
But tentatively, March 9th.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, and hoping to get that confirmed here soon, so please do take a look at the calendar. The second thing to take a look at your calendar for is item B, which is our follow-up date with the Parks Board. So I sent out a survey to you all last week, so if you could please take that survey for dates that might work for that follow-up meeting. We're looking at mid-January to continue that conversation, so please identify all of the dates that work for you so that we can get that scheduled and sent out. Next item is also calendar related, and that is the December meeting date change. So Monday, December 26th is actually a holiday. So City Hall will be closed. So I wanted to check with the commission to see if the Tuesday, which would be December 27th, would work for everyone. So if I can get, I see some thumbs up already. So Tuesday, December 27th.
Yeah, I'm flexible.
How about our remote attendees? Any issues with that date?
I think I'll be okay.
Yeah,
get
same
back
here. I
with
think
you.
that works pretty well. And if not, I'll just join virtually, being that it's the holiday season and things do come up. But as of right now, I don't have anything on my schedule.
Great.
Looks good then. December 27th instead of the 26th.
Great. The next item is also somewhat of a calendaring item. The city has been invited by Senior Services for the South Sound to come just provide a very high level presentation on the Commission on Equity. And so I was wanting to see if, Chair Jackson, if you wanted to join me, and maybe if another commissioner also wanted to join for that presentation. This would be, again, Tuesday, December 13th, and I believe it is at 1 p.m. So certainly if there's another commissioner that might be interested, I'd be happy to have a few of you join me for that presentation.
I immediately raised my hand for the opportunity, but I just realized I will be flying in to Seattle at approximately 1 p.m. on December 13th, but I will be sending you guys the best of wishes.
Thank you, Commissioner Blackburn.
Yeah.
That December 13th will work for me, Shannon.
Great.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'll be available 13th. Yeah, my vacation is on the 15th, so yeah.
Is there a time on that?
1 p.m. And I'll certainly confirm that.
That's on a Monday?
Tuesday.
Tuesday, yeah.
All right, and then the last thing I just wanted to highlight was the upcoming presiding officer elections. So that will happen at the now Tuesday, December 27th, Commission on Equity meeting. So again, this body elects officers every single year, and we do that at the last meeting in December. So that will be occurring on the 27th. That is the end of my report, Chair Jackson.
Very good, thank you. Seeing no other business to come before the commission, then we stand adjourned.
Bye, you guys. Have a great rest of your night.
Bye-bye.